My name is Chris, and here are some facts about me. I just got out of a 5-hour police interrogation, and I am never using Craigslist again. And I am now afraid to leave my house because I don't want to die. I will try to keep it brief, but we should start at the beginning. My new apartment only has my bed and my laptop in it. Otherwise, it's completely empty. I am embarrassed by that, so I don't have people over. Kinko's pays me very little, so I check Craigslist every few hours and hope to luck out with curb alerts. I was skeptical at first, but I picked up a couch and then a table a day or two later. I am really happy to fill in some of the space, even if it is with an old lady's couch. Brandon drives a big F-250 truck, so I negotiated to feed him if he helps me grab furniture and haul it to my place. I don't bug him that much, and we go way back, so he agreed to help. I felt even more grateful because he is a bigger guy, and we can lift whatever we need to into the truck. So this morning I browsed the free stuff category when I see a picture of a comfy-looking recliner. The post says it has just been steam cleaned. I have always wanted a lazy boy, so I reply that someone has picked it up and call Brandon immediately. It's his day off, so he books it to my place as I put the address in my phone. We were hunting it down inside of 5 minutes. We arrived in record time, blowing right through the residential streets and heading towards the warehouse district. I figured someone was cleaning out their storage. The chair stood on a corner by some abandoned-looking buildings. We hopped out, and I started sizing it up, while Brandon put down the back of the truck. It smelled like it had just been cleaned, and it was enormous. About halfway through lifting it, a bright flash went off from one of the cracked windows in the dilapidated building. Brandon and I shared a concerned look, and chucked the chair into the back as fast as we could. I was a little spooked, and we sped off without securing the chair. Once we got out of there, we joked about getting killed in an alley, and I asked Brandon what he wanted to eat for lunch. He said IHOP, and that sounded great to me. So we drove to get some hash browns and waffles. Entering the parking lot, this hippie-looking bicyclist shot out in front of us. I tensed up, but luckily we were only doing about 15 miles per hour, and Brandon stomped on the brakes. The tires screeched, and the momentum ended up tossing the chair out of the truck and onto the pavement. I was in shock for a second, and then started to get angry. It must have shown, because the biker took off as soon as he saw our faces. I got out to survey the damage. I had heard a loud crack when the chair hit the ground. The recliner was broken. The pavement had snapped the wooden frame on impact. I was pissed. We started manhandling the now broken and hard-to-carry chair back into the truck. I threw it in disgusted, and that is when I saw an envelope in the recliner under the chair. It was a normal-looking manila thing, about the size of a piece of paper. I grabbed it and walked to the door while Brandon parked. As Brandon walked up, he offered to pay for his own food because I had gotten robbed. But he had shown up to help, so I insisted. A cute waitress wearing a name tag that said Liz sat us at a far table. Liz said, "I hope you guys are okay. What happened?" Brandon said, "Idiot ran right out in front of us. He's lucky we didn't hit him." I said, "Nothing like a near-death experience to make you want some hash browns." Liz said, "Yeah, I'm glad no one got hurt. Are you ready to order?" We ordered our food, and Liz was being playful. Brandon took this as his cue. Brandon said, "When do you get off? You want to go do something later?" Liz blushed. I said, "Sorry about him. He is an animal. I can't take him anywhere." Brandon shrugged and howled like a wolf jokingly. Liz walked off towards the kitchen laughing. Brandon and I joked for a few minutes, and he revealed that he was in love with our current food provider and fully intended on arranging a marriage. I offered the broken chair as a dowry and grabbed our newfound hidden treasure. The envelope didn't have any writing on it, so I pulled the metal prongs together in order to open the flap. I said, "Here's hoping." I dumped the contents out on the table. I frowned and saw Brandon had a matching frown. 4 Polaroids and a black box the size of a hide key laid there. As Liz came back with our plates, Brandon smiled at her, and I flipped the pictures over. Liz said, "You boys have a nice lunch." Brandon said, "Maybe I can get you a nice dinner sometime." Liz nodded like she was busy and hurried off. I said, "Scared off the waitress." I shook my head, and Brandon dug into his food. The pictures showed 4 different people. All of them were tied to the recliner with tape over their mouths, wide-eyed and covered in tears. Nope, nope, nope. I dropped the pictures and scooted away from them in the bench seat. Brandon picked them up and looked at them for a second before going wide-eyed himself. His voice got really low and he slid them back towards me. Brandon said, "Chris, dude, these are all in different rooms." The black box thing only had a little watch battery compartment. I didn't want to break it, so I was going to wait to unscrew it when I got home. That is when the police car pulled into the parking lot. 2 officers walked in, and Liz nodded for a second and pointed at us. Hands on their guns, they asked us to step away from the table and lay on the floor. We immediately put our hands up and laid down on the filthy diner floor. IHOP floor smelled terrible, if you have ever wondered. The police handcuffed us and took us out to the curb outside, while the bigger of the 2 rambled off Miranda rights. The first cop, with the badge that said "Friendly," started in on us. Officer Friendly said, "Why do you have pictures of tied up people?" I said, "We found them in the chair in the truck. We just picked up the chair." Officer Friendly replied, "Where did you get the chair?" Brandon said, "We saw it on Craigslist. It was over by the old paper mill." Officer Friendly said, "And you 2 just took it?" I said, "It was a curb alert for a free chair. I needed a chair." Officer Friendly turned and started talking into his shoulder radio. Officer Valdez walked out of the IHOP shaking his head. He looked at us sharply, then said, "You like picking on waitresses?" I said, "We didn't, as far as I know." Officer Valdez said, "You didn't say a bunch of stuff about hitting people, death, and how you were animals? You didn't howl at her like a wolf?" Brandon said, "That is way out of context. We were joking, dude." Officer Valdez narrowed his eyes, and then said, "Do I look like one of your pals, dude? It is officer." They grilled us about the chair and the pictures a few more times. I tried to pull up the Craigslist post on my phone, but whoever posted it had removed it. A big white and blue forensic van rolled into the parking lot after a few minutes. 2 men holding little black briefcases got out. One sprayed the chair with something, and the other got out what looked like a blacklight. The chair glowed in weird splotchy patterns. As soon as that happened, we got shoved into the back of a police cruiser and taken to the police station a few blocks away. The cops got a little rougher then. I got shoved into a tiny room and handcuffed to a table. It stunk like piss and couldn't have been bigger than about 6 feet. I don't know how long I was in there. It felt like forever with just a tiny window on the door and that weird wire stuff in the glass that makes the diamond pattern. Finally, a balding older guy walked in. He had a friendly face. He sat down and looked at me for a while. The guy said, "I'm Detective Bradley. I have been assigned to the missing person case involved with this. Let's start from the top." I told the detective the entire story. He took notes the entire time without showing any emotion. Then he walked out without another word. I sat in the room sweating and panicking for 30 minutes before he returned. He strode back in, sat down, and looked at me again. Detective Bradley said, "Okay, your friend just told me what really happened, so let's start over from the beginning again." What the hell did Brandon say? I went into the entire story again. By the end, I was exhausted. Detective Bradley said, "Where are your friends?" I said, "I don't know where they put Brandon." Then he said, "The other two." I said, "I have no clue what you were talking about." Detective Bradley replied, "I have two guys holding a picture of my missing person tied to a chair, the bloody chair, and a box with 4 cents of prints found, none matching my guy. Where are the other 2 people?" I said, "I have no idea. They probably left the chair." At this point, it developed into even more back and forth and retelling the story a few more times. I was angry and scared, and I was ready to lose it. I had an idea and asked for a lawyer. That made Detective Bradley really angry, but he walked outside, and I assume he got me one. A little after, he returned with someone knocking on the door and waved through the tiny reinforced window. The detective and the guy talked for a minute before he returned to his seat. The cop replied, "The radio beacon you had on the table. What is it for?" I said, "There was a tracking beacon in the chair?" The cop said, "Don't play stupid." I said, "I almost took that home." I think me freaking out made it click together for the cop. He cooled off a little and started asking me if I saw anything while picking up the chair, or if I could remember anything about the post. I told him what I could until my lawyer showed up. He demanded I be released and then got Brandon out too. Detective Bradley stopped me on the way out though and said, "I'm not sure you were telling the truth. I'm going to keep looking. But do you think that flash could have been from a camera?" I said, "What flash?" Detective Bradley said, "The flash when you picked up the chair. Do you have any place to go that you aren't alone?" I paused for a second. Whoever did this knows what I look like, and I broke the chair and caused the investigation. Luckily, the flash came from the opposite direction of the license plate. Brandon decided to sleep over at my place, but even getting home, we were eyeing everyone, and every set of headlights had us both peeking through the blinds. I guess you get what you pay for. That is the first part of the story. This next part is an update that they wrote. There is so much to tell. I can barely believe it is real. I am sorry if this is rambling. I am writing it out as much to sort it all out as I am to tell you guys. I am also on a good bit of pharmaceutical grade morphine. Brennan and I were stuck in a state of fear, barely sleeping and barricaded in my apartment. Even the tiniest noise caused us both to grab improvised weapons. We barely talked, but when we did, it would push us both deeper into uneasiness because all we had to say was that we were terrified. The headlights at night were the worst. I would tense up as they passed across the window, thinking I was going to die each and every time. I called the police station 4 times about suspicious behavior. They only came the first 2, though. The second time, I had gotten my downstairs neighbor in trouble. He came home late and was charged with having an open container of alcohol in his car. Luckily, they didn't arrest him because he was already at home. 3 days of constant terror passed before we started to unwind a little bit. The police said it was probably a sick joke that went too far the last time I called. I think we both wanted to believe that. It felt so horrible that we didn't want it to be real anyway. We had run out of food completely at this point, which was a big problem because I am a bachelor in a new place, so we started with barely any. So by then, we were literally starving. You can only stretch a box of ramen noodles and some leftovers so far. Brandon said, "I'm going to make a supply run to Publix." I shook my head at him and said, "I don't think that's a good idea, man." Brandon ignored me and grabbed his keys. I remember thinking he was trying to convince himself it was okay. I put up a hand and tried to say something. Brandon shot through the door. "Back in 30 minutes. It will be okay." He finished the sentence as the door was closing. That was the last time I saw him alive. I waited for 5 hours and he never returned. I couldn't take not knowing anymore, and he wasn't answering his phone, so I called the police. They recognized the number and said to give it until tomorrow. That night was the scariest night I have had in a long time. The shadows even seemed to stretch towards me. Everything was a threat. I was sitting with everything off, in the pitch black, so it wouldn't look like I was home. I had already moved my car to the visitors section so Brandon could pick me up and help haul the chair, so the apartment space was empty. In the darkness, all I could hear were bumps that in my mind were people creeping in the dark after me, and my downstairs neighbor. I remember hearing him yell about the ticket in a very angry tone of voice. Downstairs guy said, "Fuck that stupid asshole! I hope he dies of AIDS." It wasn't helping my sense of safety. My anxiety intensified, and I hugged my knees in a tight ball. The voice downstairs said, "I don't care if he can hear me. I hope that bitch can." I was propped up in the far corner of the living room, clutching a steak knife because it made me feel better than having nothing. I remember fading out while still being scared, just a giant heavy black curtain slowly burying me. I woke up the next morning stiff. My entire body popped as I stood up. I woke up around noon, and I called the police again. The lady on the line said, "We will dispatch an officer to get a report from you. Stay at home." I replied, "I haven't left home in 5 days. My friend left home, and now I am filing a report." The lady switched tones. "I'm sorry, sir. An officer will be there shortly." I was staring at the empty fridge, and I had this feeling that I was just as hollow inside. I felt starved, scared, and carrying around this sinking feeling about Brandon. I have never wished I was a different person with a different life more than I did at that moment. Detective Bradley showed up at my door instead of a uniformed cop. That would save some time explaining at least. I recapped the last few days for him on my doorstep. Detective Bradley replied, "Okay, well, before we talk, you haven't eaten in 5 days. Will you come grab some food with me? My treat." I really didn't want to leave, and I got suspicious of the offer almost immediately. Detective Bradley said, "I can keep you safe. I have a gun and everything." I tensed up when he mentioned it. Detective Bradley said, "Oh, I get it." The detective then held up his police radio and pushed the button, then said, "This is Bradley at," and then he gave my address. "I am going to need a few minutes for the interview." Then he turned to me and said, "See, they all know I am here." I still didn't trust him, but I was starving. My resolve was starting to buckle. Detective Bradley said, "Look, you can sit up front and play with the lights." I had one of those moments where you should be terrified, but my first reaction was actually, "Ooh, lights," in my head. I felt silly and went with him. He was being nice on the ride there, not saying too much. We came to this hole-in-the-wall place named Sally's. It was a cop diner. I felt a lot better when I saw a dozen or more officers in uniform at the various tables and stools. They couldn't all be in on it. We ordered, and during the wait, Detective Bradley started talking. He said, "First, I wanted to say sorry for the scare we gave you. It looked really bad at the time." I nodded, because honestly I thought it looked bad too. Then he said, "We looked into the matter further, and there are similar cases going down the coast. We think it is a team of drifters, but nothing is confirmed, however." I was thankful when the giant omelets and French fries arrived. Detective Bradley nodded to the food while he was talking. The way I dug into that food, she may as well have brought me a shovel instead of a fork. Detective Bradley said, "I have some news that might be a little hard for you to hear about Brandon." I paused mid-bite. That sinking feeling somehow started sinking faster. I said, "What?" Detective Bradley replied, "We found his truck last night. abandoned behind the shopping center. No trace of him. I don't remember moving, but my head bouncing off the table woke me back up. Detective Bradley said, "We are searching for him now. I'm going to send a detail to your apartment for a few days, though, all right?" I nodded, kind of. My bones felt like rubber. Detective Bradley said, "We are pretty sure they will keep going south now. At least that is the pattern so far, but I want to be sure." I'm not proud of it, but I numbly finished eating while I was still in shock. I hadn't had more than a bowl of ramen noodles for days, and I didn't know when I would get food next. The ride back was silent. I made eye contact once by accident and received a sympathetic look from the detective. He stayed with me for an hour. After that, he made a call to the department. None other than Officer Friendly showed up, holding a bag of groceries. He handed me the bag with a wink. Officer Friendly said, "I snuck something in the bottom for you." I said, "Thanks, that's really nice of you." He replied, "I will be right outside all night, buddy, so you just make some noise or flash the lights a few times and I will come in shooting." I nodded, and he punched me on the shoulder softly. It reminded me of an older brother a little bit. I think he felt a little guilty. He went back and sat in his car. Under the milk and cereal and the microwave meals, there was a six-pack of Miller Lite. I'm not much of a drinker, but it was a nice gesture, and I had one just to take the edge off the entire situation. I didn't remember how bad beer actually tasted until it was too late. The next couple of days, the cops rotated shifts in front of my house. The downstairs neighbor was pissed, like insanely pissed. I could hear him yelling about it all night. After the third night, there was a report about a posting that looked suspiciously like the others a little further south, so they decided the protective detail had done its job. I was so relieved. I felt bad about the other people in danger, but the selfish part of me just wanted to feel safe. That is when my situation went south, along with the cops' focus. You play all these games in your mind about what you would do in a bad situation. You make all your little plans. You think that you have it all under control, and you know what to do. Then one night, you wake up with 3 men wearing ratty ski masks standing over you, with a knife to your neck and a hand over your mouth. I felt a hand grab the back of my hair. Sharp pain shot from my scalp as the fingers tightened. I couldn't tell who grabbed me because I was still blurry and coming to terms with what was happening. I got dragged into the living room head first and pushed into my computer chair at the center of the room. It was a big executive-style computer chair, and ironically, the only thing besides my laptop I hadn't got off Craigslist. I heard that odd metallic sound of a roll of duct tape being unrolled right before my head was yanked back. I felt the tape wrapped around my mouth so hard it made the inside of my mouth bleed. As the tape wound around the headrest and attached me to the chair, I realized I could only look around by moving my eyes. My head was stuck in place. Quickly, I was bound by the wrists, shoulders, knees, and ankles with duct tape. I probably should have fought more, but I had 2 guys holding me at knife point, and I thought I might be able to get away when they tried to move me. I was fully awake now, and the reality of my situation was sinking in. They weren't going to move me. I tried to struggle and pull free, but the most I managed was to hop the chair a few times. The biggest of the 3 guys pointed the knife at me and shook his head slowly. I was panicking, and it was hard to breathe through my nose, so I started huffing really hard in order to get air. I was dizzy, and I wasn't sure why. That is when the one with the green mask, there were 3, a bigger and a smaller guy in black masks as well, punched me. It wasn't a little punch either. He squared his stance and pulled all the way back, like a boxer. My face exploded in pain because I couldn't move my head. I saw the white flash when he connected behind my closed eyes and felt the vertigo as the whole chair rocked back. My cheekbone and I pounded in pain, in sync with my heartbeat. My mouth felt like a desert full of pain with lack of spit when I realized they had definitely done this before. They felt a little too organized, and this deep feeling of despair started to wash over me. I tried to jerk out of the chair again, but the tape held me trapped. This time, the bigger guy with the hunting knife started poking me with the tip of the knife, in the arm at first, and then the chest. He was smiling as I tried to squirm away from the point. He was putting tiny holes all over me that burned as the air hit them. The worst part was, he kept acting like he was going to push it deeper, and then wouldn't. This seemed to amuse all three of the monsters. My vision blurred a little. I realized I was crying. I was starting to realize that I was really going to die in this stupid computer chair. Breathing was difficult too. My nose was starting to clog with snot. I tried to yell for help, but the tape muffled the sound so that my cry was too small to do much of anything. The smaller guy in the group walked over to me and stared me right in the eyes. His eyes were way too light, that creepy almost white blue. I couldn't look down too well, but through the numbness of the tight tape, I felt him touching my hand. He never broke his stare. My pinky exploded in pain. I couldn't move it. He slowly smiled and stepped back. My finger was definitely broken. I could see it sticking up at a 90-degree angle from my hand. It felt like it was made of lava. I say lava because of the burning plus all the pressure. It hurt so bad, I couldn't form a thought. I started bawling now, crying for my life. Every day I wasted doing nothing. Every time I was too scared to try something, they all came back to mock me in that moment. A flash snapped me out of it. The biggest guy had put his knife down on the coffee table and taken a Polaroid camera out of his bag. He shook the picture menacingly against his hand. The smallest one took another picture out of the bag and stalked over to me. He held it up in the dim room, but I couldn't make it out. When he lit his lighter, I saw Brandon, tied to a chair. He was in bad shape. He looked like he was in pain. These animals had tied him to a wooden chair in what looked like a shack with some kind of wire. He was bleeding from where he had tried to yank free. After forcing me to look at him for a long time, the three men laughed at me softly as I tried to kick and claw at them. The small one pushed the burning hot lighter against my arm and started hitting me in the face with the photo lightly. The pain was intense, and I could smell my flesh burning. But it wasn't as bad under the pain of a broken finger. I swelled with rage at that moment. I was able to force myself to not react. I stared in his eyes, promising that I would kill him someday. I swelled with rage at that moment. I was able to force myself to not react. I stared in his eyes, making a promise to myself that I would kill him someday. The other two found it more amusing than my struggling, which seemed to anger the smaller guy more. He punched me in the burn so hard I heard a crack. That snapped me back into the throes of agony, which seemed to satisfy him. He grabbed my chin and slapped me across the face as hard as he could. I felt some of my hair rip out from the tape. The entire side of my face burned. The bigger guy waved the knife through the air slowly as he walked the few steps to my kitchen. It was only separated by half a counter from the living room. He smiled under the mask as he turned the stove burner on high. This is when it clicked. They laughed at the smaller guy's attempt. This was a game, and I wasn't a player. I was just the field. I moaned then. I'm not sure if it was agony, hopelessness, or desperation, but all of the feelings overwhelmed me at once. After what seemed like an eternity, the knife came off the stove. It glowed in the darkness from the heat. It was bright red like a hot coal. He started moving slowly towards me, but kept its point focused on the same spot. Step by step, I started to feel the terror. Another step closer confirmed it. He was pointing that knife at my eye. I started trying to flail out of the chair. He took another slow step closer. You could see the delight in his face. I fought with all my strength, and I managed to stretch some of the tape, but not enough. The knife was an inch away from my eye. I couldn't stop blinking from the heat. I could barely breathe, but I was too scared to move with it that close. I shut my eyes as I saw his forearms tense so he could stab me. He waited. I think he was waiting for me to open my eyes again. I kept pushing it through my mind, but I knew if I moved, it was all over. My leg was on fire instantly. I couldn't look down, but the knife was against my inner thigh, burning me. I struggled and yelled and tried to buck. There was movement in the room, but I couldn't see it. It felt like I got hit across the face again. All I could say was, "Knife! The knife! The knife!" It hurt twice as bad coming off my leg as it did being put on my leg. I bellowed in pain, a rather shaking primal type of scream. I looked up and saw a blurry guy with a gun. As I was getting buried under that all too familiar heavy black curtain of unconsciousness, I heard a voice. Officer Friendly said, "Jesus! Were they gonna burn his dick off?" I woke up to the sound of beeps and the smell of bleach. I was warm and fuzzy all over. I think the IV in my arm had something to do with it. Officer Friendly said, "Hey, you up?" I said, "You saved my dick." I realized what I had said, and that seemed hilarious to me at the time, so when he started laughing, I joined him. We laughed for a couple of minutes. My arm was in a cast, my finger in a splint. I had patches on my face and my leg. Bruises in different yellows and purples seemed to be all over me. I said, "Thank you." Officer Friendly replied, "They have you all patched up, but they need to do some tests. You need anything from home?" I nodded yes, as I started to get up to pee. Officer Friendly said, "You need to go to the bathroom?" I replied, "I think I got it. I'll let you know." I managed to get into the bathroom without too much trouble. Half of my face was deep purple, and the eye on that side of the face had filled with blood. I looked like a B-movie monster. I felt like I should have been more upset at the time, but I was still warm and fuzzy. Officer Friendly said through the door, "The state is picking up the tab on this one, so you don't have to worry about a bill." I said, "Oh, that's nice of them. You don't smoke, do you?" He wheeled me out front by the cop car. Then he bummed a cigarette off a lady who was sitting there. He came back and handed it to me lit. Officer Friendly said, "Your neighbor called in a noise complaint and said you were having a party. Me and Valdez knew that didn't sound right. So we took the call and saw the nondescript bad guy van. Then we peeked through the window blinds." I said, "Yeah, that guy said he wants me to die of AIDS." My tone was pretty matter-of-fact about it. I was still a little stoned. Officer Friendly replied, "Well, he accidentally saved your life then." I started laughing a little, and then said, "You said make some noise. I would have flicked the light, but I was a little tied up." Officer Friendly showed back up 5 minutes early. He had my laptop bag, a McDonald's bag, and another plastic bag. He handed me all three. The McDonald's bag had a Big Mac and a large fry, and the other bag had 2 packs of Marlboro Reds and a lighter. I ate the Big Mac in about 3 bites and started shoving fries into my mouth. I then realized I hadn't said thank you, so I was trying to swallow and looked up at him. The most I could manage was a thumbs up, and he just laughed. Officer Friendly said, "Okay, man, I will stop back by tomorrow. Are you good to get back in your room?" I had finished swallowing and replied, "Yeah, thank you so much for this." He replied, "No problem. You heal up. I will see you tomorrow." I offered the lady some French fries. She ate some with me. Sure, now I am your best buddy. I had one last cigarette before heading back up to my room. I had to ask the lady at the counter where it was. My laptop was dead, so while it was charging, I had been sitting back trying to reflect on what happened and sort it all out. Trying to type this all with a broken pinky is challenging. I am still hoping that Brandon made it. Part of me thinks he probably didn't, but I don't know that he didn't. There aren't any reporters or anything. I would think that there would be, but no one is bugging me so far. I was debating on moving, but there is a certain comfort in knowing that every day in the apartment is never going to be the worst day anymore. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. So this story, the author says it's 100% true. I did read through the comments, and I'll have a link in the description if you would like to go read through them as well. People did point out some of the holes, but he did explain them as well. There was a couple holes that I thought about as well, such as a chair flying out of the back of a truck going 15 miles an hour, but it could have just been a big chair, and maybe the walls of the truck bed weren't that big. Who knows? So, we can either completely believe him or not, but he's pretty damn detailed, and either way, this is a scary, scary story. And it really makes you wonder what people are capable of. You never know if someone's actually going to try to do this, because realistically, it's a pretty good setup. Get some random person to come pick something up, now you have a tracking device, you can do whatever you want. They did get fortunate at the IHOP though, that the waitress saw the pictures and didn't say anything, just called the police. I think that actually worked to their advantage, even though at the time it seemed like a disadvantage. I think it really saved his life. I really hope they're able to give him some closure with his friend Brandon, as well as notify Brandon's family, even though none of these are their real names. Obviously. I've never met an officer with his name Officer Friendly, although that would be awesome, I think. Let me know down below what you thought of this story. Regardless, I think it'll still give a lot of you the chills. I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.